Someone could be inside your house right now, and you wouldn't even know. United States. In the United States, many people live in large, detached houses. Neighbors are far away. Streets are quiet. And at night, everything disappears. But that silence does not create safety, it creates uncertainty. One thought repeats, what if someone is already inside? Homes are often isolated, community ties are weaker, and the media constantly shows break ins. So every small noise feels louder. Checking the locks becomes a habit. And even at home, you never feel fully safe. There is another fear: serial killers. Figures like Ted Bundy have turned real crimes into cultural stories. And this idea stays in people's minds. They look normal, but they are not. This makes strangers feel dangerous. Walking alone at night feels risky because the threat is invisible and unpredictable. And then there is something else: old houses, empty places, and the feeling that they are not empty at all. Movies like The Conjuring have made this fear stronger. At night, even silence feels wrong. Something is watching. In the end, all these fears share one idea: you are not as safe as you think. United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, fear does not always come from the unknown. Sometimes it feels closer. One of the most common fears is street crime, especially at night. In cities like London, the idea of sudden, unpredictable violence has become part of daily awareness. This fear comes from reality: crowded cities, late night streets, and constant news about knife attacks. So people stay alert, they watch their surroundings, and silence on a dark street feels heavy. There's another fear: being watched. The UK is one of the most surveilled countries in the world. Cameras are everywhere, on streets, in stores, even in quiet corners. It creates a strange feeling. You are never truly alone. Some feel safer, others feel controlled. And then there are the old places: ancient houses, narrow streets, buildings that have stood for centuries. These places carry stories, and sometimes those stories don't feel finished. At night, a simple sound can feel wrong. A shadow can feel out of place. And one thought appears: something is still here. In the UK, fear is subtle, quiet, controlled, but always present. Germany. In Germany, fear is not loud. It is quiet, controlled, and deeply rooted. One of the oldest fears comes from the forests. Dark, dense forests have always been part of German folklore. Stories of lost travelers, of something watching from between the trees, and the feeling that once you step too far inside, you may not find your way back. This fear comes from isolation: endless trees, limited light, and silence that feels unnatural. There is another fear: being watched by systems. Germany has a strong awareness of surveillance, not just cameras, but control. This comes from history, a past where privacy was taken away. So today, even small signs of monitoring can create discomfort. Who is watching and why? And then there are the old stories. Figures like Krampus or dark folklore creatures remind people that fear does not always disappear, it evolves. In Germany, fear is not chaos, it is order, with something hidden underneath. France. In France, fear often hides in places that look beautiful: old buildings, narrow streets, historic cities filled with life. But behind that beauty, there is something darker. One of the strongest fears is what lies underground. Beneath Paris, there are endless tunnels, the catacombs, miles of narrow paths filled with human bones, skulls stacked in silence, walls built from the dead. It creates a deep, unsettling thought. You are walking above death, and sometimes very close to it. There's another fear: old, haunted places. France is filled with centuries-old houses, castles, and abandoned buildings, places where people lived and sometimes died. Stories remain. Whispers, unexplained sounds, a presence that feels real. Some places are not empty, they remember. And then there are cursed locations, places people avoid, not because they are dangerous, but because something feels wrong. A heavy atmosphere, a silence that doesn't feel natural. In France, fear is not loud. It lives in history and refuses to disappear. Italy. In Italy, fear is deeply connected to belief. Faith, tradition, and the unseen world often exist together. One of the strongest fears is possession. The idea that something not human can take control of the body. Exorcism is not just a myth here. In some churches, rituals are still performed: quiet rooms, strict prayers, and moments that feel beyond explanation. Voices change, movements become unnatural, and one question begins to grow: what if it's real? There is another fear: the evil eye, known as malachio, a belief that someone can harm you through jealousy or intention, without touching you, without speaking, just a look. People wear charms, they follow small rituals, because one idea remains strong: not all danger can be seen. And then there are sacred places, ancient churches, old monasteries, abandoned religious buildings, places built for peace. But sometimes they feel heavy. The silence is different. The air feels still, as if something stayed behind. In Italy, fear is not separate from faith. Spain. In Spain, fear often feels old. Not loud, not sudden, but old. One of the strongest fears is the idea of restless spirits, not always monsters, sometimes grieving figures. A woman crying in the dark, a presence near empty roads, old wells, or forgotten places. This fear feels powerful because Spain is a country filled with memory: old towns, ancient churches, stone streets that seem to keep the past alive. Then there is another fear: abandoned villages. Spain has many places that were left behind over time, and that emptiness creates a very specific kind of unease. When a village is silent with broken windows and no voices, it does not feel truly empty. It feels as if something remained after everyone else left. And then there are paranormal stories, whispers in old houses, shadows in historic buildings, unexplained sounds in places with long histories. In Spain, these stories survive because history is everywhere, and people often feel that some places do not simply disappear into the past, they stay with it. In Spain, fear is not just about what you see, it is about what the past refuses to release. Turkey. In Turkey, fear is not always something you see. Sometimes it is something you feel. One of the strongest fears is the idea of unseen beings, entities that exist but are not visible. In many beliefs, these beings are real. They are called jinn. They are not always evil, but they are not human, and that alone is enough. Because the fear is simple: what if something is here and you cannot see it? This fear becomes stronger at night. Dark rooms, quiet houses, sudden sounds with no clear source. People avoid certain places, empty buildings, isolated areas, and spaces that feel different, because some believe these places are not truly empty. There is another fear: the evil eye, the idea that someone can harm you without touching you, just through envy, a look, a thought. So people protect themselves with symbols, with prayers, because one belief remains: not every danger is physical. In Turkey, fear is deeply connected to belief. It lives in silence and in the unseen. Japan. In Japan, fear does not always come from violence. It comes from what refuses to leave. One of the deepest fears is the idea of yurei, restless spirits, souls that cannot move on. They remain because of pain, anger, or unfinished emotions. They do not disappear. They wait. Long black hair, pale faces, silent movements. And one belief stays strong. If a spirit has a reason, it will find you. Then there are cursed entities, stories like Sadako, a presence that does not just appear, but spreads through objects, through screens, through something you interact with. Once you are connected, it does not let go. This creates a different fear. What if it's already too late? And then there are urban legends, stories told quietly, like Kuchisake Onna, a woman who approaches you and asks a simple question, but there is no safe answer. In Japan, fear is not loud. It is patient. It follows, and it does not forget. China. In China, fear is not chaotic. It is structured, respected, and deeply rooted in tradition. One of the strongest fears is the idea of restless spirits. Not all souls move on. Some remain. Not because they want to, but because something was left unfinished. These spirits are not always aggressive, but they are sensitive. And one belief is clear. If you disturb them, they will notice you. There is a specific time when this fear becomes stronger. The ghost month. A period when people believe the gates between worlds open. Spirits return. They walk among the living. So people become careful. They avoid certain actions. They do not stay out too late. They show respect, even in silence. There is another fear, forgetting the dead. In Chinese culture, ancestors must be honored. Offerings are made, rituals are followed. Because one idea remains. If you ignore them, they may come back to remind you. In China, fear is not loud, it is quiet, controlled, and always respected. India. In India, fear is not always quiet. It is intense, emotional, and sometimes overwhelming. One of the strongest fears is the idea of possession, the belief that a spirit can enter the body, not slowly, but suddenly. A person changes, voice changes, behavior becomes unfamiliar, and one thought appears, this is no longer the same person. There is another fear, the presence of wandering spirits. Some are believed to be trapped between life and death. Figures like the Chudale, a spirit often described as a woman with something unnatural about her appearance. She does not always attack. She approaches, and that makes it worse. There are also places people avoid, old roads, empty areas, large trees at night. Because some believe these places are not empty, they are occupied. In India, rituals are everywhere, prayers, protection, spiritual practices. Because one belief remains strong. If you are not protected, you are exposed. In India, fear is not distant. It is close. It is personal. And it can take control.